It is clear that the DGS is not really performing where we need them to be.
Why the president of a local NAACP office says the Department of Juvenile Services is failing our young people. More and more Safe Streets workers finding themselves on the wrong side of the law. The questions this is raising about the organization.
I think there needs to be some changes in leadership.
A former Baltimore mayor says it's time for the city school CEO to step down. The changes she thinks could be made to improve your children's education. A truck ripped apart after being hit by a train.
Seeing the whole thing was terrifying. It was really terrifying.
Neighbors share how it brings back memories of this fiery crash at the same site 10 years ago.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. The Department of Juvenile Services under fire once again tonight after two teenagers are arrested for breaking into several cars, dragging an officer in a stolen vehicle, and leading police on a chase.
There's no resources to help these children to get on the correct path. They just continue to repeat and offend. We need DGS to do their job.
Well, the Randallstown NAACP issued a scathing message to DJS saying they're failing children and not protecting the citizens of Baltimore County.
Fox 45's Keith Daniels spoke with the president of that organization. He joins us now live with the sharp criticism. Keith?
Well, Mary and Kai, the president of the Randallstown NAACP, told me that he continues to get complaints about the rise of juvenile crime in Baltimore County. Now, he says police are doing a good job, but tonight, the one thing that he believes that's making that job difficult.
They're out stealing cars, carjacking, and hurting people.
Ryan Coleman, president of the Randallstown NAACP, ringing the alarm over juvenile criminal offenders, calling out the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services with a blistering statement to his members today, saying DJS is failing juveniles and not protecting the residents of Baltimore County.
It is clear that DGS is not really performing where we need them to be. Every time a juvenile has contact with the police, there are no resources to ensure that the juvenile corrects their behavior.
Coleman says he and his organization have been studying the issue for the past 9 months. The results, he says, juvenile offenders arrested by police are often returned to their parents with no additional resources, oftentimes resulting in repeat juvenile offenders because of limited intervention from DJS at best, seemingly no involvement at worst.
There are no parenting courses for the parents. There's no mentoring. There's no boot camps. There's no resources to help these children to get on the correct path.
Coleman asking for a meeting now with DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi to come up with solutions to stop what he calls the juvenile offender crisis. Coleman's concerns coming after the police pursuit of two teens Tuesday, 14 and 15-year-old suspects in a stolen car, dragging an officer, then chased by Baltimore County Police to the city. The suspects, accused of several car break-ins, finally cornered and captured. One of the latest crimes involving juveniles. Community leader, the Reverend P.M. Smith, calling on parents to be held accountable.
If you are a parent and your responsibility is to raise your child, the first thing you have to do is establish authority. Then you set boundaries. Boundaries are rules and lines that you don't cross.
Well, Coleman says getting into the parenting issue is, quote, very complex. Meantime, he's called for that meeting with DJS leaders. He says so far tonight, he has not heard back on when that meeting will take place. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. Last month, a scathing report from Maryland's Attorney General showed DJS struggled with increasing youth capacity, a lack of educational opportunities, and inadequate programming. The governor's office tells Fox 45 he's committed to fixing the issues he says he inherited from the previous administration. DJS isn't the only issue when it comes to juvenile crime. Governor Wes Moore has signed hundreds of bills into law, but not one addresses juvenile crime. Lawmakers haven't done much to change the current juvenile justice system, according to critics, preventing children under the age of 13 from facing charges in most cases. Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates has said he believes juveniles should be held accountable for crime. One political expert says other elected leaders should follow his lead.
Fortunately, the city has Ivan Bates, who appears to be the one individual who wants to turn the entire situation around. But he needs help. He needs open support from the mayor. He needs open support from the city council. And if you listen to Ivan Bates, it appears the city could possibly be on its way to changing these things.
Fox 45 News has spoken with the city state's attorney about his stance on juvenile crime. You can find all of our reporting on our website, foxbaltimore.com.
Well, an overwhelming majority of people who commit the most violent crimes in the city get away with it, according to the latest numbers presented at today's public safety hearing. At the end of 2022, we reported the homicide clearance rate was 36.3%, meaning almost 2/3 of the killers last year had gotten away with it so far. Almost halfway through this year, it is down to 13% of the nearly 100 people killed. More than 80 families know the person who murdered their loved one is still out there. Deputy Police Commissioner Richard Worley says cases yet to be processed will significantly improve that number, and he expects detectives to close at least half of their cases by the end of the year, more in line with the national average.
We do have several cases that we are working on, so I think we're going to get up over 50%. I think we'll get up closer to the national average, and I think we're getting there. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Well, that brings us to our question of the night. Are city leaders doing enough to hold violent criminals accountable? So far, 100% of voters say no. Go to foxbaltimore.com/vote to weigh in.
As Keith mentioned, police say the teenagers arrested in that car chase drove from Baltimore County into Baltimore City. Today, Baltimore County Police Chief Robert McCullough and County Executive John Olszewski talked about the partnership between the city and county to fight crime.
I can say that Commissioner Harrison and I have met a couple times. We've had several conversations in person and over the phone. We also have several meetings lined up later this month and next month.
If there are opportunities for targeted investigations or focusing on hot spots using the data, particularly around the border, we welcome those opportunities.
That was TJ Smith's radio show. Baltimore City will start enforcing its youth curfew in a few weeks. Coming up at 10:30, we'll take a look at Baltimore County's plans when it comes to a curfew and the impact it could have.
A former Safe Streets worker pleads guilty to negligent vehicular manslaughter after a 2020 crash left a cyclist dead.
Fox 45's Mackenzie Frost has been digging into the city's gun violence prevention program, and a Fox 45 investigation reveals how many former Safe Streets workers have faced criminal charges.
Gardnell Carter pleading guilty Monday to negligent vehicular manslaughter just days ahead of his trial scheduled to begin Wednesday. All stemming from a crash taking place here in the bus lane at the intersection of East North Avenue and Enzor. Charles Buster Banks killed in December 2020. Fox 45 News speaking with Banks' sister-in-law, Virginia Gray, who didn't want her face on camera.
Come home and find that out. It was just around Christmas. It just ruined everything. We never got to say goodbye or you really tell him how we loved him and how we felt about him.
Last summer, Fox 45 News obtaining this internal email sent by a senior staffer within the mayor's office of neighborhood safety and engagement on behalf of Director Shante Jackson. The email, dated February 11th, 2022, sent to all of the Safe Streets community-based organizations and other senior staffers in Monsey, written about Gardnell Carter. Yesterday morning, Carter was arrested on an open warrant, Jackson wrote, adding, following the assistance and support of Mayor Scott and Monsey, Carter will be released today. The city agency later telling Fox 45 News no monetary support was provided to Carter. Rather, it was emotional support. Days after Fox 45 News started investigating Carter, he no longer worked for the city. This isn't the first time a Safe Streets worker has found themselves on the other side of the law while working for the program. Just last week,
he had shared with me probably about a couple weeks before he was murdered that he was looking to be hired by Safe Street.
The family of Damon Scroggins telling Fox 45 News he wanted to work for the Woodbourne-McCabe location, but was killed before he was hired. Ronald Brady Jr., a Safe Streets worker at the time of the shooting, was charged. Brady eventually found not guilty in March of 2023. But Scroggins' family says they don't look at the violence prevention program the same.
Has your view of the Safe Streets program changed throughout this whole?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. Yes. My belief is that our city government is financing a criminal enterprise. I believe that within my heart.
There are several other examples. Ronald Alexander, seen here in a photo from a federal complaint wearing a Safe Streets shirt holding, quote, a bag of suspected drugs. Prosecutors say he was using his job with Safe Streets to try and stop investigators from tracking him. Alexander, sentenced in September 2021 to more than 11 years in federal prison for distributing fentanyl, cocaine, and heroin in the city. In 2018, Ricky Evans pleading guilty to federal racketeering conspiracy charges. Evans admitting to being a high-ranking Black Guerrilla Family or BGF gang member, distributing drugs and okaying the murder of another BGF member. Evans also an employee of the Safe Streets East in McKeldrey Park, using the location on Monument Street to hold BGF meetings. That's the same location that closed and reopened back in 2015 after guns and drugs were found stashed in the office. According to these court documents, Terrell Hallen charged with drug and assault charges in 2015, listing Safe Streets East as his employer. We know Safe Streets hires people often with a criminal history, but the city refuses to share the names of the employees, redacting those details in documents we often get from the city. A panel with BPD, nonprofit running the Safe Streets site, community members, and Monzi staff are all involved in the hiring process. We sent Monzi a few more questions trying to understand how the vetting process works, asking, since Mayor Scott's administration began, how many people have been rejected during the hiring process? Is there a specific crime that automatically excludes someone from hiring consideration? And given the history of criminal activity taking place while violence prevention should be happening, what, if any, policies have changed under the Scott administration to prevent it from happening again? Those questions going unanswered. Meanwhile, the family of Charles Banks, who was killed coming home from work, is left wondering if Gardnell Carter, the man who just pleaded guilty to charges for their loved one's death, got special treatment because of where he works.
Because you connected with Safe Street, and that's not just, that's not fair.
Gardnell Carter is scheduled for sentencing to take place in September, and he faces up to 8 years in prison. In the newsroom, Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
Well, after making it up to 74 today, we're cooling down to crisp numbers already in the 50s to near 60, even a 48 at Easton under mainly clear skies. We're going to settle to about 45 to 50 or so for tonight. So it's jackets out for the morning, but a nice warm afternoon coming tomorrow. We'll let you know how it looks then and for Mother's Day. And if there's rain, my Weather Authority forecast.
Still ahead on Fox 45 News at 10 o'clock tonight, calls for change at North Avenue. Why a former mayor tells Project Baltimore the city school system needs new leadership. Former President Trump takes the stage after he's found liable in a civil sex abuse case. Now the heat is turned up on the current president's son. A truck driver survives being hit by a train in Rosedale. The safety feature never installed, and now memories of a fiery train crash 10 years ago.
Tonight, former Mayor Sheila Dixon is calling for a new leader of Baltimore City schools.
As Project Baltimore's Chris Papps reports, Dixon says the results are simply not there, and it's time for Dr. Sonia Santelises to go.
It's now been 13 years since Sheila Dixon was mayor of Baltimore. Since leaving office, she has watched her city become one of the most violent and fastest shrinking. With 569,000 residents, Baltimore's population is down 50,000 since 2010. And according to Dixon, the reason people are leaving is simple.
People can say it's because of crime, but the biggest thing is because of education. People want the best education for their children.
And Dixon says families are not receiving that from Baltimore City schools.
If you were mayor right now, what's the first thing you would do with the school system?
If I were mayor right now, the first thing that I would do with the school system would be to bring in all of the various unions, the administration, sit down at a table and ask some hard questions. What are we going to do to change this?
Dixon says when she was mayor, every month she had a meeting with school leaders, the CEOs, school board members, and unions. She said she learned about the challenges and worked on solutions. But she says these meetings also let the school leaders know the mayor was watching.
The fact that Baltimore City provides funding to Baltimore City schools, we have a responsibility to make the schools accountable.
It's difficult to compare Baltimore City schools now to when Dixon was mayor. A lot has changed in the city and the school system itself, including changes in graduation requirements and state testing. Here's what we do know. During Dixon's term, Baltimore City Schools was one of the lowest performing large school systems in America, just like it is today. But it was showing signs of improvement.
From 2007 to 2010, when Dixon was mayor, key metrics like enrollment and graduation rates were increasing. Compare that to today. Most key metrics are going in the wrong direction. Over the last 5 years, enrollment is down 3,000 students. Graduation rates are down from 72% to 68%. And when it comes to student performance, federal test scores have dropped since Dixon's term. According to the nation's report card, students performed better in both 4th and 8th grade math and reading in 2009 compared to 2022.
Money's important, but accountability is also just as important. You can't keep putting money into a bad system and not have accountability and show results.
Dixon believes Baltimore City needs to rethink education. She favors year-round schooling and longer school days. With 58% of city students chronically absent, the most in the state, Dixon says schools need to work directly with families to get students in class.
Anytime you have to stimulate a parent or guardian to get their child to school, something's wrong.
And according to Dixon, there's one more big change that city schools needs to make, and it involves CEO Dr. Sonia Santelises. Current Mayor Brandon Scott strongly supports Dr. Santelises, but Dixon says the results are not there. It's time for her to go.
I think there needs to be some changes in leadership because of all the challenges and the results that we're seeing in the schools. I think it's time. I think she's a nice, wonderful person. I think we do need to have a change.
I'm Chris Papst, and this is Project Baltimore.
Tonight, dozens of Harford County parents and community members made their voices heard at a county council hearing over the proposed budget. County Executive Bob Castley submitted a $19 million cut to schools to avoid a tax hike. Most spoke against that cut, urging the council to reject Castley's budget, but some support it.
I urge you to reject Bob Castley's budget and send his team back to the drawing board. His bare minimum budget does not adequately support essential services.
Anyone who votes for this budget, I assure you, you will have a primary challenger in your party. I assure you.
Bob Castley was elected over 2-to-1 to be a fiscally conservative person with our tax dollars. 2 to 1, to me, that's a mandate.
Castley warns if the school system got its full wish list of funding, each household would see a $500 tax increase. Critics say the cuts will cripple classrooms and drive away teachers.
It did not have to happen. It should not have happened.
A train collides with 2 trucks in Rosedale today, and it's not the first time something like this has happened at that very crossing. Why some are saying it could have been prevented.
House Republicans lay out their case against the Biden family. I'm Christine Frizzell on Capitol Hill with why they say they have clear examples of influence peddling and corruption.
Up to 74 this afternoon with sunshine and a chilly overnight on the way, dropping down not as cold as last night, but down to about 40s to near 50 degrees by early tomorrow morning. But look, temperatures off to the races again by tomorrow afternoon. As we work through the rest of the week, could have some mid-80s on the way, but by Mother's Day, an outside chance of some showers moving in, and 70s. I'll let you know if there's any more rain chance over the weekend. My Weather Authority forecast.
For months now, House Republicans have been going through the financial records of Hunter Biden.
And today they made many of those documents public and alleged millions of dollars in payments were funneled through various bank accounts to members of the Biden family to gain access to then Vice President Joe Biden.
National correspondent Christine Frizzell has details.
House Republicans say after 100 days of investigating, there's ample evidence of corruption, but still a lot more they hope to learn.
This committee is investigating President Biden and his family's shady business deals that capitalize on Joe Biden's public office and risked our country's national security.
Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer laying out his case. Members of the Biden family received millions of dollars in payments from countries like China and Romania.
What did they do? What was the business? What service did they provide? What value did they add? What did they do to warrant receipt of the money? That is the fundamental question.
The answer, they believe, had to do with buying access to people at the highest levels of the U.S. government, including then Vice President Joe Biden. And the payments were made through a series of bank transfers from multiple limited liability corporations, or LLCs, that formed during that time, used to hide where the money was coming from.
You have Rosemont Seneca Partners, Rosemont Seneca Advisors, Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, RSP Holdings.
There's also this now infamous letter signed by 51 former intelligence officials, which stated stories about Hunter Biden's laptop appeared likely to be Russian disinformation. Republicans in a new report now asserting that letter came about when the CIA, or at least an employee, may have helped in the effort to solicit signatures for the statement. Now, as far as his son's business dealings, House Republicans did not put forth any evidence that Joe Biden knew about them, only saying it was inconceivable that he didn't. The White House called the news conference a political stunt. White House spokesman Ian Sams tweeting that Comer offered no evidence of wrongdoing or influence on government decisions, calling the attempt, quote, really desperate and sad. Hunter Biden himself mostly staying silent on these matters as GOP lawmakers push ahead in an investigation that appears to go far beyond him and his finances. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting.
We want you to weigh in on our national question of the day. Will the Hunter Biden controversies affect your 2024 vote for president? Yes or no? Vote right now by taking out your phone, scanning that QR code there on your screen.
Former President Trump takes the stage at a CNN town hall. What he's saying about those convicted on federal offenses in connection with the January 6th riots.
The president and his team expecting difficult days ahead at the U.S. southern border. I'm Scott Duman in Washington with a look at what happens now that a controversial law is expiring.
We're following three big stories at 10:30.
The Department of Homeland Security warning the nation's immigration system is about to be put under incredible strain as Title 42 comes to an end tomorrow. What happens now that the pandemic policy is expiring?
We are weeks away from the enforcement of Baltimore City's youth curfew, the impact it could have on recent crime, and whether Baltimore County will follow suit.
And take a look at this. A train collided with 2 tractor trailers in Rosedale this afternoon.
We begin there. This isn't the first time something like this has happened at that intersection.
Fox 45's Jeff Abel has been on this since it broke this afternoon. He joins us live from the freight line tonight. Jeff?
Well, you know, the tracks are still closed here in Rosedale tonight as investigators probe exactly what went wrong here at this crossing, a crossing that has no lights or crossing arms, just a sign warning motorists to beware. For more than an hour, crews struggled to pull a tractor-trailer rig off the tracks. The truck, one of 2 hit by a train, was dragged a quarter-mile down the tracks before coming to a stop.
Shortly before the train approached, the truck driver made the decision to enter the tracks.
Shane Sanders was preparing to cross the tracks himself when he heard the sounds of a train and watched as the truck driver failed to clear the tracks in time.
He stopped on the track, and the train made impact on his passenger front door. Seeing the whole thing was terrifying. It was really terrifying.
Video from our Fox 45 drone shows the place where the CSX train came to a stop on the southbound tracks. Witnesses say the truck driver jumped out of his truck just seconds after the collision. He escaped with what's believed to be non-life-threatening injuries.
How far away do you think we are?
It all seems frighteningly familiar to those who live and work in this community. 10 years ago this month, another crash happened on this same stretch of tracks. At that time, the train carrying chemicals derailed, sending a plume of smoke over the community of Rosedale.
There's been a lot of accidents down here, and it don't really seem like anything's been done to alleviate the situation down here.
I do think not having crossing arms here is an issue.
There are no lights or crossing arms to alert drivers of an oncoming train here. Just a sign, which some witnesses insist is hardly warning enough.
It did not have to happen. It should not have happened.
CSX tells us tonight that no one on the train was injured today, and they're warning all motorists to practice safe behavior when approaching a railway crossing. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
We'd like to see the stories in your neighborhood. Scan the QR code on your screen. That will take you to our website where you can share pictures and videos. You can also use your Fox 45 mobile app. Just click on the Explore tab, then chime in.
Memorial Day weekend is about 2 weeks away, and that's when the city is set to enforce the youth curfew, in part to protect children. It comes as juvenile homicides and shootings are up over 50% this year compared to last year. Fox 45's Vincent Hill joins us with a look at why some say enforcing the curfew could be problematic. Vincent?
Yeah, Mary, problematic and chaotic is how one law enforcement expert describes enforcing a juvenile curfew.
A stolen car refusing to stop, leading to a high-speed chase in Baltimore County around 12:30 Tuesday morning.
Approaching Webster Avenue, still continuing 70 miles an hour, roughly. No traffic.
It all ended in Baltimore City.
Kenwood and
One resident witnessing the final moments.
The car was coming this way. They blocked the car off, coming up Pentwood. Suspects jumped out the car, scattered.
Those suspects, according to Baltimore County Police, a 14 and 15-year-old. In Baltimore County, there is no juvenile curfew. Last week, Baltimore County Police Chief Robert McCullough on whether he would support one.
Well, I mean, that's something I can't speak to right now in terms of any type of curfew.
Around 2:45 Wednesday morning, Baltimore City Police responding to the shooting of a 15-year-old girl at a local hospital. That's 3 juveniles involved in crimes within 24 hours in the wee hours of the morning.
This is nothing new in Baltimore. Curfew is something, curfew laws have been on the books. Enforcement has been on the books.
After 2 teens were shot on Easter Sunday at the Inner Harbor, Mayor Brandon Scott renewing his push to enforce the curfew this Memorial Day weekend.
Everyone that's grown up in Baltimore knows about how a youth curfew is done.
But not providing any details on his new plan on how to enforce it. Law enforcement analyst Melissa Pinkleton says there's a built-in problem.
What underage looks like to you is not the same as me.
Along with not easily being able to identify who's a juvenile. Pinkleton pointing out, like the teens who led Baltimore County Police on a chase, not every juvenile will comply.
And I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but some juveniles are going to be involved in use of force incidents.
She says the outcome of the encounter relies heavily on the juvenile's response to the police.
I have had numerous fights with just a juvenile because some juveniles are 6'3" and 220 pounds. And there's a lot of situations that we can de-escalate, but we can't de-escalate everything. In some instances, we're going to have to escalate, and that's part of keeping your city safe.
And of course, we have reached out to Mayor Brandon Scott several times about what his new enforcement plan is. He says we'll have to wait until Memorial Day weekend. Meanwhile, Baltimore County Police responding, saying at this time a curfew is not necessary in Baltimore County, as the brave men and women of the Baltimore County Police Department proved last night those who engage in violent criminal activity will be sought out, found, and held accountable. For now, we're live in Baltimore. Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. There are growing concerns tonight that unserved warrants could be contributing to city violence after Fox 45 News uncovered a wanted man is accused of attempted murder while on the run from police. The Baltimore City Sheriff's Office runs the Warrant Apprehension Task Force. Sheriff Sam Cogan says he's more than doubled the task force since he took office, but staffing is still a roadblock.
I think it's a national issue, and so we have to look at the resources that are being put into warrants.
While the Sheriff's Office handles some warrants, the Baltimore Police Department handles warrants related to violent crime. Sheriff Cogan says he believes that should be expanded to his office, as BPD is nearly 500 officers short. As you heard Sheriff Cogan mention, staffing shortages exist in police departments and even sheriff's offices nationwide.
We need to bring the rhetoric down regarding policing. We need to make this a more attractive job again. The way we do that is by having fully supported by our elected lawmakers.
The CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund is urging Congress to step up and support officers.
Mayor Scott today announcing some new steps that he says will keep more Baltimore residents in their homes. The mayor says homes valued at $250,000 or less and are occupied will be removed from the city's tax sale this year. The city says it will work with these homeowners to come in compliance with any taxes owed.
Former President Trump is in New Hampshire, where a CNN town hall just wrapped up. The Republican frontrunner kicked off his first major primetime 2024 campaign event by reiterating claims that the 2020 election was rigged and by defending his actions during the January 6th riot. When asked if he would pardon any of the rioters convicted of federal offenses, he said he would most likely should he win election or re-election.
What they've done to these people, they've persecuted these people. And yeah, my answer is I am most likely, if I get in, I will most likely, I would say it will be a large portion of them. You know, they did a very, and it'll be very early on. And they're living in hell right now.
Well, Trump also says he doesn't owe former Vice President Mike Pence an apology. This in response to Pence's claims that the former president endangered his life on January 6th. Taking a look right now at the Fox Quad box on the bottom left, more than 600,000 public service workers had student debts forgiven in the past 18 months at a cost of $42 billion. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program cancels a borrower's remaining debt after 10 years of public interest work and is separate from the president's broader plan before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Top right Senator Dianne Feinstein returns to Washington. Her first day back since being hospitalized with shingles over 2 months ago. The 89-year-old Democrat from California received help getting around, but also a warm welcome despite some in her own party calling for her resignation.
On the bottom left, the California Reparations Committee recommends looking for eligible residents who are descendants of slaves to receive up to $1.2 million. Governor Gavin Newsom was noncommittal when asked about it, saying in a statement that dealing with the legacy of slavery is about more than cash payments.
Bottom right, a San Francisco official is looking to limit security guards' use of their guns. A city bill would ban lethal force to protect property. It comes after a Walgreens security guard fatally shot a person who was accused of trying to rob the store.
America's immigration system is about to be put under incredible strain. That's the warning From the Department of Homeland Security as Title 42 comes to an end tomorrow.
Chief political correspondent Scott Thuman shows us why the problems are outweighing the solutions.
The alarmingly long lines not to get into the country, but of those already here seeking asylum, creating a state of emergency in El Paso, Texas. It's better to turn ourselves in so that everything is done legally. We have faith in God and hopefully everything's okay, said this man from Venezuela.
Nothing's a guarantee. Everything's a case-by-case basis, but we do want to get them through that process, get the process started.
The urgency born out of what's on the way. Here alone, they expect a surge of 10 to 15,000 immigrants when Title 42 expires on Thursday, now turning closed schools into shelters, with President Biden conceding solutions are in short supply.
We're doing all we can. The answer is it remains to be seen. It's going to be chaotic for a while.
Our plan will deliver results, but it will take time for those results to be fully realized.
But critics say the time has run out.
If the local border communities, whether it's in San Antonio or other places, or the NGOs cannot handle that, then they're going to do street releases. Will they be able to track those individuals? The answer is they're not going to do a very good job.
Meanwhile, governors from Texas to Florida spending millions in state funds to send immigrants elsewhere, trying to highlight what they see as failures by both Congress and the president.
They get mad when people want to enforce the border, and yet when these people, the illegal aliens, are brought to their jurisdictions, they scream bloody murder. It's shining a light on how absurd the federal government's policies are.
At the other end of the line, sanctuary cities like New York, but receiving sometimes 200 to 300 a day, the mayor now rerouting many to suburbs, though residents there too left wondering, where is the help? In Washington, I'm Scott Thuman.
We have multiple agencies, each one kind of pointing the finger at the other.
A promise to make a dangerous school crossing safer goes unfulfilled. Fox 45 News demanding answers months after two children were almost hit. Ahead on the late edition, Congressman George Santos facing more than a dozen federal charges, how they could impact his campaign as other members of his party share their